Hey, this is Jamie. This is the Regain Wellness podcast. So you can tell by the title what this episode is about. And depending on when you listen to this show, I pre-record these shows and they come out. I think this might be out on the 1st or the 2nd, or you might be listening to it later. But obviously I'm recording this, it's only, a day or two after Kobe Bryant has passed away. So I thought with this episode, I'd talk a bit about Kobe Bryant as far as his influence and his work ethic and what you can take away from that. And then I had an interview a few years ago with a guy named Tim DiFrancesco, who was the head strength and conditioning coach of the Lakers. And so he came on to talk about, what it's like working at the elite level. But the show is primarily based on nutrition and how he improved, nutrition for the Lakers and how that influenced the rest of the league and everything like that. So, I mean, even if you're not a basketball fan or not maybe totally familiar with Kobe Bryant, there's still a lot of takeaways, because what we discuss about nutrition and training are things that you can apply to your own life. So I think it's worth a revisit back onto that. And then, and we talk about Kobe Bryant too. And we recorded the show, Tim and I recorded the show not long after Kobe's last game when he put down 60 against, was that Utah? So just, a bit of his perspective on working with one of the greatest of all time. So we'll get to all that in a second. So we've learned what an influence Kobe Bryant has had, not just on the game. I mean, that's a legendary status on its own, and he'll live forever in that legendary status. We've learned more about, him being a good family man and father, and his humanitarian work and his support of the growth of women's sports and the WNBA and women's soccer. And he's always there to support along, with the athletes and his daughters. But the thing I want to focus on is the work ethic, the training, the determination of someone who's already an elite athlete, always was an elite athlete, one of the first to go right from high school into the NBA at 17, 18 years old. And these guys, a guy like him, has enough natural ability and skill that he could probably coast on it, or he probably could have always coasted on it, but he worked harder than anyone. And the stories of his training and his intensity and his work ethic are as legendary as he is. And you hear all the stories of he would be at games 2 to 3 hours before, at least, warming up and preparing for the games. You would hear about other teammates and stuff, say early mornings, they're so inspired and influenced by Kobe and his work ethic and his training. So they're trying to get to the gym earlier for workouts and shoot arounds, either to try and impress him or to, sort of build off his energy and his intensity. And, they think they're getting there early at 8 a.m. or 9, usually they're called to be there for say 11 for the warm up and shoot around and whatever. And, they get there an hour or two before, and Kobe's already been there for 3 hours, working, and they see him shooting, and then they can barely, keep up with their own workout. Then they leave, and then Kobe's still going. I've worked at a kids sports camp in Northern Connecticut. And one of the things there is we always bring in every year professional NBA players, the odd NFL guy. And so we've had a lot of awesome, people come through. And also we bring in, guys who have coached at an elite level through colleges and who've worked with pros and stuff. And we had a guy years and years ago, a guy came in, and I cannot remember I think it was Williams or something like that with his last name, but basically he'd worked alongside, the college level, getting guys ready for pros. He's been around. He just talked about Kobe Bryant the whole time and how hard he worked and how, no one could touch his work ethic and his intensity. And the same thing, they'd, show up wherever, and Kobe before a game would have already played the equivalent of 1 or 2 entire other games in his own practice and work before he'd go out and play the game that night. He told the story the night Kobe scored 81 against my Toronto Raptors here. Same thing. He was there. He was telling something. He was there 3 hours before, and he put through the work ethic of the equivalent of a game and a half worth, then went out and put down 81, like the modern day record, the second highest score of all time against the Raptors. And, no disrespect to Wilt Chamberlain with his 100-point game, but the game is a little different then, where defense wasn't a priority as much. And he was, a 7-footer before the Giants had taken over. So for Kobe Bryant to do 81 points in the modern era against teams who are trying to shut him down and different defensive systems is astounding. And the other thing, and you hear this all the time as well, how, he's already an all-time great as far as his offensive abilities and his records and his legacy and his championships and his gold medals and everything like that. But the difference with him is there's not really been anyone in NBA history who's that dominant on both ends of the court, because he absolutely shut it down on defense and would specifically take on the top player on each team and still shut them down and then still be a massive all-time best offensive threat, which is pretty crazy because you get guys who are specialists in one area, or the top guy or scorer, not disrespecting other modern guys, or like Steph Curry, he's not the top shutdown guy, and that's for a whole bunch of different factors. But Kobe Bryant wanted to take on the top guy and then still produce. Like it's pretty amazing, that legacy he's left there. The other thing that stands out to me personally is the motivation into always not having excuses. You know what I mean? Like none of us, well, unless you're a pro athlete listening to this, we're not at that level. And all we can do is, apply that sort of same consistency and work ethic into our own lives, whatever that is, whether you're a weekend warrior, or you play pickup basketball, or you play recreational volleyball, or you just do like your own boot camp classes or CrossFit, or even if you just like go bike riding and play tennis 2 to 3 times a week, we can still take influences from a guy like this and put it into our own training and our own exercise and fitness to get results. And the thing with Kobe Bryant is he would never make excuses. There was always time to do something or to train, or if he didn't feel like doing it, or he was too tired, or the travel schedule is hard, still getting the workout in, or later in the day having an opportunity. You just say it had like 10 minutes, you could do a bit of cardio. That's what Kobe Bryant did. And for myself, that's something I found myself doing over the years. Like say it's later in the day, instead of doing nothing, like, I could do another bike ride. I went early this morning, but I could do another 25 or 30 minutes. And I do these things without thinking now. And I realize that's because of Kobe Bryant and stuff we've sort of picked up watching and observing him over the years and trying to instill in myself. And again, like I do these things without thinking, like those extra reps in the gym, or getting there when you're too tired, or if things are going to be a little swamp later, getting up earlier and going earlier. And again, all these things, it didn't occur to me till not long ago, and I was thinking about this before he had passed away, and like these, those extra sessions you try to get in and pushing yourself and not saying, I'll get to it tomorrow, was all like Kobe Bryant, and I still do it to this day. So that's just, my personal take from everything related with Kobe. So what we'll do is I'll put up this interview now I did with Tim DiFrancesco. Doesn't work for the Lakers now. He works with a company. It's called TD Athletes Edge. There's a few things he talked about, because this is from years ago, this interview. So there's a few things he's talking about as far as, say, his website, or he had some like webinars and stuff coming on, and things that have obviously already finished. But again, a lot of amazing takeaways about his own story and getting to work with the best in the world, specifically the Lakers, and a lot of amazing nutrition lessons that will apply to you at whatever state you're at. And then again, we finish and we talk about some of the stories, because this guy's on the floor. He watched Kobe Bryant for years and years, and then he was there for that last game, and just his insights and everything like that. So hopefully you enjoy it. There's some other stories. I'll leave it. Just listen. One later in, I think around the 50-minute mark, and he's talking about, because he worked one-on-one with Kobe, and he talked about Kobe calling him at 4 a.m. after they had just landed and got into a hotel after a long road trip, wanting to work out, because Tim's the strength and conditioning coach, and Kobe it's 4 a.m. and he's asleep. Just amazing stuff like that. So hopefully you enjoy this interview, and we'll pick it right up here with Tim. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm really pleased to welcome my guest here, the head strength and conditioning coach from the Los Angeles Lakers, Tim DiFrancesco. How you doing, man?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to have you here. So I want to talk about a bunch of stuff that pertains to, fitness and nutrition and recovery and that whole deal, but a little bit about what your own background is as far as your own history with sports and fitness and what got you on the road to becoming a head strength and conditioning coach.
Sure. So kind of the on paper version, my undergrad is in athletic training. So from a 4-year undergrad degree in athletic training at Endicott College, I went to a 3-year doctoral program in physical therapy, and from there was immediately working after school at an outpatient PT clinic and enjoying that setting, but had a real itch to get into the performance, strength, and conditioning side of things. So started my own small-scale performance training facility outside of on the North Shore of Boston. And that's where TD Athletes Edge was born, and we can kind of circle back to what TD Athletes Edge is all about later. But and so as I was doing those two things kind of simultaneously, running my own thing on the side, working as a PT at this clinic, I was approached by my former basketball coach in high school, who had just taken a job with the Bakersfield Jam in the NBA D League, and so he was taking a position as an assistant coach and was on the search for an athletic trainer and a strength coach for that team, and approached me about it and basically wanted to know if I knew of anybody who would want to do it.
Right.
And it just turned out to be really the right time for me to make a move like that and explore working in the team setting, and I had been looking forward to any opportunity along those lines that came up, and it was in front of me. So I basically said, yeah, I know somebody. I would love to do that. And end up working in Bakersfield, California for 2 years, 2 seasons as I continued to run my own performance training thing back on the East Coast and in the off seasons, and then getting ready for a third season to go back to Bakersfield, and Gary Vitti, the head athletic trainer for the Lakers, contacted me, and we had been in Bakersfield. We had been affiliated with the Lakers in my second season.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really know this, but I was on his radar, and
Nice.
To make this beginning to be long story shorter, I it basically was in the right place at the right time, doing the right things to where caught Gary's attention, and he really wanted a strength coach, somebody who was running his weight room, to have a perspective of a physical therapist. So the rest is kind of history, and I've been head strength and conditioning coach with the Lakers for 5 seasons now.
Awesome. Your own sports background, did you gravitate towards one sport, or were you kind of a bit of everything guy?
Yeah, I mean, I did everything, but it was always every season. If it wasn't basketball season, I was doing that sport with the idea of preparing for basketball.
Right. Gotcha.
So for me, it was always I always gravitated towards basketball, and it was always something for me that it was just an area of passion and a sport that I truly love to play and love to be around.
Yeah. So when you're starting with the Lakers, you're with, obviously these household names and big time players. When you're starting in, what's your original approach to what you're bringing to the table as their new strength and conditioning coach? Were you kind of following what had been going, or did you have a lot of your new own insights that you brought to them basically?
I went into that, I think, just with the mindset of get my head above water here and stay there, and then don't show any sign of kind of being awe-inspired or that fan side of me. I think, obviously on the nuts and bolts and sort of the clinical side of it, I had some ideas of things that I could bring to the table that weren't maybe being done or addressed in the weight room or from a performance training standpoint. But it was really just make sure that I go in, gain these guys respect, and see what is going on. I mean, that first year it was, let me get a lay of the land, and then by the time I get the lay of the land, I will have accomplished the number one thing for me at that time, which was develop individual relationships with each player. From there, I figured, okay, I would have a foundation from which I could start to make some changes. There was not an idea of me walking in there and trying to make wholesale changes with guys that were a few years away from being voted into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was, I think that was the main focus.
So I'm a personal trainer. I work in fitness, and the focus on this podcast is a little more nutrition based. Like that's my real interest here. And so you caused you really brought this new approach to nutrition. I think it was with Dr. Kate Shanahan, and there was a real, kind of change in the landscape as far as how athletes should approach nutrition, because a lot of pro athletes have horrible nutrition practices. You see it across the board. When you came in 5 years ago, was that your intent, or did that slowly evolve into your mindset of how important nutrition is to healing, recovery, the whole deal?
Right. As I was getting the lay of the land, I can remember the first game day that I, was on duty for, and so we're at Staples Center, and I'm getting an idea of what happens on game day for food and in the locker room and in the players' lounge area at the Staples Center, and it was arena popcorn. It was whatever order of vendor-based food that the players, I would say 3 to 6 players, would give money to a ball boy, and they would go grab, whether it be a hot dog or chicken fingers and French fries, whatever it might be. It was alarming to say the least, and we even had a guy who was known for, in that I witnessed him many times my first season having a quarter pounder with cheese before the game, not too far before the game. So yeah, I mean it was alarming to say the least, and I came in prior to knowing that with an idea and a passion for linking the power of strong nutrition habits with performance, for sure. And I definitely was looking to see what I could bring to the table to improve those areas, because I felt as though in some ways it's a bit of a secret weapon. Yeah. And so once I saw the state of the union, so to speak, it was like, okay, yeah, this is some of the changes and the ideas that I felt like I could bring to the table. The situation was primed and ready for it. And so you mentioned Dr. Kate Shanahan. She reached out to myself and our head athletic trainer, Gary Vitti, and basically her husband gave Gary several of her books, and Gary is a busy guy and has a lot on his plate. So for him to take the time to read through this, first of all, I got to give him credit on doing that. Second of all, he recognized that essentially this philosophy of using food, the right foods as the right fuels, and the right foods as almost like medicine was really something that caught his eye, and so he had me take a look at it, and I felt like, yeah, this is something this is something I would love. These are a lot of these philosophies and principles are things that I personally think are very important and have believed in as well. And I think her approach and the way that Dr. Kate Shanahan has really set the approach out in a way that is easy to, for lack of a better term, I mean, easy to digest for people. And so it was like, it was just sort of one of those things that at the right time, it caught the right people's attention, and we felt an immediate connection to what she was doing, and felt like that what she had put together was something that we could help to put in front of our players and would help them. So we just, that relationship was a no-brainer when we first came across what she was all about.
Nice. So what did those early changes look like as far as what you were introducing nutrition wise? Like guys going from eating friggin' Big Macs and nachos. How did you start implementing in the nutrition? Was it kind of a slow process to introduce these new things, or what was the original approach there?
Yeah, it was. So nutrition food in general is a polarizing topic, and it hadn't been, I think, in a lot of pro locker room settings for a long time, and even still in many cases, it's just not something that many people are willing to dive into tackling with their players in an aggressive way, because I mean, it can really be, it can be challenging enough to develop strong relationships with your players, and then when you start messing with their food, it can make it twice as hard. So I think that we definitely set out to take baby steps, and we learned along the way what we thought were baby steps, or what I thought were certain baby steps maybe weren't as small of steps as the people, the end users felt like they were. So it was definitely a learning experience, and something where ultimately what we've figured out is you're sort of going to have a breakdown of what I sense is the rest of the same breakdown you would roughly find in the rest of society, is that in a given locker room, you're going to have a 30, 30, 30, and 10% breakdown, where you have 30% of the guys that are these all-in early adapters. Mm-hmm. Something is new and exciting, different than what they've heard before in a certain area. They're ready to roll. They oftentimes are the more veteran-based players that have gone through some trials and tribulations physically or performance-wise, and realized that the nutrition piece is very important. They've probably heard that the key to good nutrition is eating lots of skinless, boneless chicken, steamed broccoli, and brown rice. And although there's not anything wrong with any one of those things in a vacuum, in an overall sustainable approach to nutrition, that's probably not going to take care of business. So because of the fact that our approach and Dr. Kate's ideas are a bit more complex than that, and simply different than that in many ways, that early adopter group that is like, I'm all in, let's do it, is 30% of your locker room. And then you have another 30% where they're willing to, it sounds intriguing, they're willing to wade in up to their waist on certain basic ideas. They're not going to peel back all the layers to the onion, but you've got their attention. Additionally, another 30% where they're, okay, just give me the bare bones of what might help me, and I'll consider it, dip my toes into the water type of group. And then 10% who just simply don't really care, and they don't really want to hear about it. And so it was really a matter of figuring all that out as we went, and it was, I think, interesting for me. Probably many people would sort of assume, well, they're pro athletes, they should all be really interested in this and want to make all the right decisions. But you have to remember that a big portion of our roster at any given time is somewhere between the ages of 19 and 24.
Right.
So none of us, can say, yeah, I was making all the best moves when I was 19 to 24. So it's been a really interesting process for me to go down and figure out the right way to do it. It certainly comes back to figuring out really what are, according to the end users, the baby steps that can be helpful for them, but enough of a step for me to say we're accomplishing something.
Yeah. It's really interesting to hear you saying of that dynamic existing in a pro locker room, when I can think of that same thing, that same dynamic in, every gym I've ever worked in. There's that,
sure.
that 30, and that's really interesting to hear that translates over no matter who you are. You're a superstar or you're the average, Joe coming in on a Saturday. That's interesting.
Right.
So along with the nutrition, a lot of the big things you guys did and yourself, you've been dubbed Grass-Fed Tim, and the, introduction of grass-fed meat, which I'm a huge proponent of too, and that's like all I consume. I get all my beef and basically proteins from, local farmers and the whole deal. Can you talk about the benefits of grass-fed beef, why we should be consuming it, and just how you see it play a role in, for, not just a pro athlete, but in, an everyday health aspect?
Yeah. So first off, exactly. So I was dubbed Grass-Fed Tim, thanks to my good buddy Meta World Peace. Depending on, I guess that's the name he goes by. It could be anything from that to, depending on when you knew him, it might be, you might still call him Ron Artest, or right. Some people may call him Panda's friend, or whatever he may have Mr. or may Peace, not have changed his name to at this point in time. Absolutely one of my favorite players to work with, and was actually really, he's very, very dialed into his nutrition and taking care of his body from that end to the training to the recovery and all those areas, and so it makes working with him a real pleasure. But I think when I came in, I was fairly enthusiastic, to put it diplomatically, about the source of getting guys to be educated on how important the source of where their food comes from is. And so certainly within that charge of educating guys, it would come back to the idea of animal proteins being from grass-fed sources. And I probably used that term a few too many times, to the point where he began calling me Grass-Fed Tim. So
nice.
So there's how that all came about, and yeah, I think that it's just from a nutrition profile standpoint, the idea of that source of beef or whatever animal protein we're talking about, having been raised correctly and had the food sources that they're designed to be in front of and have available to them there, then it simply changes the nutrient profile of that protein. And from a grass-fed beef standpoint, you're looking at what it does from having greater omega-3 content versus grain-fed beef, or just from, even in many cases, having it also will change the flavor profile. So those are things that, being able to, the minerals and the vitamins are also something that need to be considered, because an animal that's taking in much more of the grass from the ground, where they get where the soil base is, that they get these important nutrients, it can just simply change those nutrient profiles of the various B vitamins and other parts of the beef. So so from that end, it just is sort of easy to say, well, why that's more beneficial than another, comparing grain to grass-fed beef. I think that it's when you have that available to you and you're able to make that choice for various reasons, it kind of becomes a no-brainer as far as why would you not do that when you look at those differences. And then from there, it's also something that we try to educate our guys on actually how you prepare it. So if you're going to take the step of going down the path of getting grass-fed or wild or pristinely sourced animal protein, then make sure that you're not then devaluing this better version of the animal protein by cooking it in a way that might cause the nutrient profile to change for the worse. So high heating and cooking over flame constantly can do that. And so there's different, depending on who, on my end, depending on the player, and it sometimes is a conversation I would then have with their chef or their wife or whoever it might be that's going to prepare this food. There's just a lot to the process to make sure that you're making the right choices. And at the end of the day, though, it's not that there's not that much to it. It's on the education piece. It's a lot of new information, but it's really figure out, just start to know where your animal proteins are coming from, and then cook it low and slow. Or if you're going to cook it in a shorter period of time, make sure that you're not severely overheating in that short period of time with constantly on a direct flame and to the point where you're charring the beef. So there's a different way to cook grass-fed beef, right. and you have to sort of figure that all out. But it's there's a lot to the process.
Yeah, I really push on people that idea, that low and slow cooking process, and making use of crock pots or slow cookers, and you can take those cheaper cuts of meat, still get the best source possible, but these things don't have to be that expensive. Throw in some garlic and carrot, whatever, just some thyme and herbs, throw it in with a bit of broth, let that sit for 6 hours. It'll be as good as any meal you'll have. And it's costing you pennies per serving pretty much. So exactly. I think that comes up. I think that's one of the issues when people hear grass fed is they think it's, the cost is going to be through the roof, and it's not the cheapest thing. But when you look at the grocery store, supermarket, feedlot equivalent, which is basically like fat, disguised as beef, by the time the cooking process is done, you're left with this just watery, reduced mess. Whereas the organic, like the grass-fed organic version, retains its shape, keeps it, that whole deal.
Yeah.
So another thing you guys were big on, I was just wondering if you could speak on a bit, is the idea of, well, just sort of touched on broth, but the idea of bone broth and how that can work in healing and recovery. And if you could just touch on that for a bit. Yeah.
So I think that it's an easy thing for people to gravitate towards, because it's the basis of any number of comfort foods. Mm-hmm. So a broth or a stock that's been prepared traditionally in the classic sense of those terms is something that we can all think of the smell of, or the idea of being a part of a favorite family recipe of a soup or a stew or some version of a comfort food for anybody. And so thinking of family members making these recipes, and it's an easy thing to want to sort of, that sounds delicious. type of meal because of that. So there's that piece, which is interesting because instinctually we're attracted to it for, I believe, a reason, and that comes into like what you touched on is what is it about that just makes you feel so good when you have it, and it's not just because grandma made it. It's that's certainly part of it, but there's reasons and there's actual science behind that, which is sort of how these compounds within the broth, the breakdown of the cartilage and the joint material that you boil down becomes it is now in this broth that is part of a recipe of whatever you're going to then consume, and those compounds have the ability to essentially act as like heat-seeking missiles towards any damaged joint tissue or material in your own body.
Yeah.
So, it's something for a basketball player who has constant effort to maintain and take care of those damaged or beat up tissues of the joint surfaces and joint structures and support structures within the musculoskeletal system, that having a something to fight that or to support that maintenance process of those tissues is critical, and that's really where the broth comes in from our end. Is essentially any buffet that we have available for our players, which is typically 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and when we're on the road, we have them at the hotels, that there's going to be some recipe with broth in it, whether it's an actual soup or whether it's other recipes like that for that exact reason.
Yeah. I think people instinctively, like you said, they know there is the healing benefits of broth and stock, and I think that's why people kind of instinctively crave, chicken noodle soup as kind of a classic, or soups in general. They've learned that. I was wondering, sort of speaking on that. That's the average person knows that. What are some tips for the average person who's starting to get, trying to take control of their health now, looking to make improvements in their fitness and nutrition? What's some basic starting points you recommend for that person? Again, that the baby steps concept.
Right. I think it's comes back to getting an appraisal of where you're at from a refined sugar consumption standpoint, and then also understanding how many things in your daily menus include inflammatory or toxic oils, such as the canola, corn, soy, vegetable, even cottonseed. Those types of oils can really wreak havoc from an inflammation standpoint at a low grade, at a low level, but over time have some really negative results as far as consuming them over time. So I think that's where I tend to direct people trying to make the first right moves is just understanding. One of the things that we did for our guys was to start to convert grams of sugar into teaspoons of sugar.
Okay.
And so the easy way to do that is there's like in 1 teaspoon of sugar, there's roughly 4.5 grams. And so from that, you can look at a label and add up the total carbs plus the total sugars and divide that number by 4.5, and you're going to have a number of teaspoons of sugar.
Yeah.
And So once you start doing that, it can be really eye-opening for people to realize how many teaspoons of sugar you're taking in a given sitting, or within a certain product that you consume often, or in a given day or week.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's a big thing, just to recognize your starting point of that, and then to say, well, how can I sort of drop off of, get slowly back away from that, and again taking that baby step approach. Is we wouldn't ever encourage somebody to say, if you're taking in 28 teaspoons of sugar every day, say starting tomorrow you drop that down to 0 and you never touch a gram of sugar.
Yeah.
Again, it's really got to be a process that you slowly make sustainable by taking small steps with. So I think that piece, and then just educating the other piece being educating the people on the other side about which oils are not good for me, because they have these really sneaky names like vegetable, soy. All these names have been made to sound pretty healthy.
Yeah, right.
And so recognizing where the sneaky ones lie, and then recognizing and understanding which are the healthy oils to look for and to substitute, which in our case would be coconut oil, avocado oil, peanut oil, grass-fed or pastured butter, using that as a cooking oil. Those are probably the some of the top ones that we would want somebody to steer closer towards, and instead of relying on the vegetable, the soy, or the canola and corn oils that can really wreak havoc.
Yeah. No, awesome. I'd say though that's two of the biggest thing. Just start, drastically reducing your sugar intake. Ditch those, horrible refined oils, and
right.
That's simple step, but huge step. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely. That can be some transforming stuff there.
Right. I mean, I love how Dr. Kate puts it is, because the beautiful part of addressing those oils, it's not like anybody is going around saying, I can't kick that item, whatever food that I love, because it has so much vegetable oil and I love the taste of vegetable oil, right? Nobody's going around saying that. It's getting those things out of your diet drastically and pretty rapidly can be really transformative and really reasonable, because you're not even gonna know, other than the benefits that you start to feel from not having it there. You're not really even gonna know that you're not having that in your diet anymore.
Yeah, and you're not missing a thing. Like, there's no such thing as an essential sugar or an essential canola oil.
Right.
You're missing out on your nutritional spectrum. So
right,
nothing to fear there. So
yeah, so it can, just making those subtle adjustments on those two things can actually make a pretty big impact for some people, depending on where your baseline is in those areas.
Nice. So winding down here, can you talk about what Athlete's Edge is all about? And then also, you've got a webinar coming up in July, and I think it's just talking about like navigating your career if you're someone looking into sports medicine or rehab, or if it's strength and conditioning like you're doing. Can you just touch on all this stuff?
Yeah. So TD Athlete's Edge at this point is really, for me, and for the people that are around me and supporting me in that is really my platform to be able to help to share my experiences and my insight and knowledge in the areas of training, nutrition, strength and conditioning, performance, general performance, whatever that word means to you. It doesn't have to mean that you're a high-level athlete necessarily, that you get paid to do that. performance means something different to everybody, and I love the process of solving that puzzle for not only myself but sharing what I know with others to be able to do that as well. And TD Athletes Edge is the platform that I use to be able to communicate with our community and get that information out and have the back and forth and learn from teaching and teach from learning so that's what TD Athletes Edge is. Our website is www.tdathletesedge.com. We have a regular blog there, and I'm fairly active on social media, including Twitter and Instagram, which is at TD Athletes Edge.
Yeah, I'll link all this up on the show notes so
Beautiful.
People can check.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, I really enjoy interacting with our community there because that's what this whole thing is about. You can't go about it solo. I mean, it's got to be a continuous learning process, a continuous sort of supported process from the people around you, and that's what I really enjoy being a part of that. So fairly active in those areas. We have a YouTube page which you can search TD Athletes Edge, and I post a fair number of videos there of different exercises and ways to things to incorporate into your training that can help to, no matter what level you're at, high level athlete or somebody just starting to get into the whole fitness world, and so we're there as well, and then you brought up the webinar, so I'm really excited about that. I had a number of people that helped me along the way to figure out within this big world of really constantly evolving world of sports medicine / performance / rehab, and you could throw the term strength and conditioning and fitness into it all too. And there's so many different avenues and things going on within the world of all under that umbrella right now that the people that really helped me to rein in where is it within all of that you see being your Super Bowl, or I've used the term, what is it within that gives you goosebumps? And I mean, it just, for me, I go back to the opportunity that I had as a Division III college basketball player. We really didn't, at the school that I was at, Endicott College, we didn't really have a true strength and conditioning coach. And so it was tasked to me to because I had shown some interest in it and was an athletic training major in school there. And so, like, hey, my coach basically told me, you're in charge of our strength and conditioning. And it was my first real foray into programming and building out a program throughout the year that would be basketball specific and prepare our players and our team for success. And I just remember getting the feedback from my own teammates and saying things like, I've never felt so good on the court before. This is awesome. I mean, we've never really had somebody who we always just kind of were basically winging it. I mean, we didn't know what we were doing in the weight room. We didn't know any of the stuff. And that gave me goosebumps. And so for me, that became the area. But like I said, this whole area is so vast and there's so many different things happening currently that with the webinar, my goal is to be able to, all at one time in one place for whoever is interested in addressing that and working their way through the entire scope of it all to find their Super Bowl. Let me share my experiences. Let me give you the lay of the land as I see it, and how I can help you sort of target that Super Bowl and head towards it in a more focused and calculated fashion, because that's what it's all about. I mean, it's there's a lot of hard work and hours that go into being a professional in this field, and you may as well be lining yourself up for what your Super Bowl is.
Yeah, and that is, what's the date and time in July?
Yeah, so that's July. That's going to be July 18, and so the with that we're going to go 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and all the details and the information there are on. You can just go straight to our homepage, www.tdathletesedge.com.
Oh, and all the info's there.
Yep. So there's a link directly on the front of the homepage. So that webinar is July 19th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and all the info, you can find that right on our home webpage, www.tdathletesedge.com.
Nice. Sounds awesome. Okay, last few questions, just finishing up. What was Kobe's last game like?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That, I don't even think that I can call that in 5 years I've been to quite a few NBA games now, and so that was nowhere near. You can't call that was like an experience.
Yeah,
I mean, that was not just a game. It was. I'll tell you what. It was really an experience that it was like I mean, you were sort of not really sure if it was actually happening. I mean,
yeah.
Because as it unfolded, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like he's going to get 40 in his last game, and that became like, no, maybe he's actually going to get 50, and then somehow that became he's going to get 60, and I mean, from where I began to look at the time and his points and say he might get 40 to where it became, I'm saying to myself, he's actually going to get 60. It's just sort of like, I don't even really remember. It was like a dreamland state that I was in. Like, this can't be happening.
It seemed like an out-of-body experience just watching it on TV. I knew one guy who was at the game, and he was Instagramming the whole night, and you're just like, this doesn't happen, this sort of thing. But, that's Kobe, I guess. So,
Right. I mean, just leave it to him to do something in a show-stopping nature right up until the last second, wearing a jersey. I mean, it was just. I think the piece that a lot of people don't see is as this season wore on for him, the real what it really took for him to be capable of lacing him up and not just getting out there on the court, but getting out there on the court in a way that you could score 60 points.
Yeah.
It is something that behind the scenes, it was a challenge for him. I mean, it was physically a grueling season that a lot of people didn't see, because he did an amazing job of really pacing himself and knowing when he could push the gas or not. But the 20 years had really physically taken a toll on him, and I think that a lot of people faced with that scenario probably just sort of throw in the towel before they grit it out or grind it out the way that he did. So it was pretty neat to be a part of it.
Yeah. We've had, I was telling you, me and Tim were talking before, and I work at this summer camp in the States, and every summer we bring in some, pro athletes from, usually the Knicks and stuff. They'll come in, like you've had, Wilson Chandler, and we, just guys like that. And they were telling these stories about Kobe when they were playing. They'd come in and he'd be there practicing 3-4 hours before the game. Going hard though, not just shoot arounds. Play the game, then be back out there working on stuff. And they thought they were dedicated, showing up a couple hours before, and then he'd be there 5 hours going hard. I'm like, that's unhuman, work ethic.
No, there's no question. I mean, absolutely. I think the word that always comes to mind for me, having been around him for the 5 years I was able to be, is just ruthless.
Yeah,
I mean, just absolutely ruthless in his approach. And one of the stories I always go back to is we had played in either Toronto or maybe it was New York. I can't remember, but we had played on, say, a Friday, say a Thursday, and we were flying Thursday night to Chicago to play them in a back-to-back situation. So we were going to then obviously play the next day. And we, in those situations, you're not probably getting into your hotel room and putting your bag down and sitting down on the bed until about 3 to 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And so I had just finally we traveled from whatever city it was into Chicago, got off the plane, got on the bus to the hotel, got everybody's bags situated, and then you finally get up to your room and can kind of shut it down for a bit. So that was probably about 3:30 to 4 a.m. and I had suddenly was halfway into really getting into a good sleep, and I heard something on my phone. So it was him, and he said he had texted me, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I mean, in my head, I'm like, "What else would I be doing? I'm half asleep right now, trying to get some sleep." And I texted him. I said, "Sleeping," and he's like, "Okay, well, I'd like to get a workout in. I'll meet you in the hotel gym in 15 minutes."
Wow.
And I mean, it just, he just was a different animal.
Yeah.
There's no other way to put it. And pretty impressive.
Yeah. Speaking of Kobe, so I live in southwestern Ontario in Canada, so I'm close to Toronto, and he put 81 down against the Raptors.
Yeah.
So last thing, I just do a quick rapid fire with all the guests, just a few favorites, and that was it. So favorite TV show.
TV show. I'm gonna have to go with. Let's see. It's not too rapid right now. There's a lot of them. I'm gonna go with. I'm just blanking on the with Frank Underwood there.
House of Cards.
House of Cards.
Nice.
Thank you.
Favorite athlete growing up.
Bo Jackson.
Nice.
That's so easy.
Nice. Favorite movie.
Stand By Me.
Nice. And last one, if you could only eat one meal or food for the rest of your life, what would it be? That's probably a tough one too.
Yeah, well, it would be anything. I absolutely love Vietnamese food. I just love the. It would be anything from the Vietnamese cuisine.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much for doing this, man. Really appreciate it.
Oh man, my pleasure, Jamie. Thanks a lot. Great stuff.